The movie opens with Nick Dunne, a seemingly average man, coming home on the morning of his 5th wedding anniversary. He finds the front door slightly ajar, and the house in a state of disarray. His wife, Amy, is nowhere to be found, and there are signs of a struggle, including an overturned table and broken glass. Confused and concerned, Nick calls the police, setting the investigation into motion. Detective Rhonda Boney and Officer Jim Gilpin arrive at the scene. They begin a preliminary investigation, questioning Nick about his wife's routine and any recent issues in their marriage. As they look around, Detective Boney notices small but suspicious details, such as a blood spatter in the kitchen and odd clues left behind. The atmosphere quickly shifts from concern to suspicion as Nick struggles to explain the situation. With Amy still missing, the police investigation quickly escalates. Detectives Rhonda Boney and Jim Gilpin begin questioning Nick in greater detail, and small inconsistencies in his story start to raise red flags. As they search the house, they find unsettling clues: a large bloodstain in the kitchen, hidden behind freshly cleaned floors, and a meticulously placed envelope labeled Clue 1, suggesting that Amy may have left a scavenger hunt for Nick, a tradition on their anniversary. As more information surfaces, the media picks up on the case, quickly turning Amy's disappearance into a public spectacle. Nick, already awkward in front of the cameras, struggles to maintain his composure. His forced smile during a press conference, coupled with his lack of visible grief, only fuels public suspicion, painting him as a cold, possibly guilty husband. Meanwhile, Amy's parents arrive and amplify the media frenzy by holding emotional press conferences, pleading for their daughter's safe return. The narrative shifts as Amy's diary is introduced, offering a glimpse into her perspective on the marriage. Through flashbacks and diary entries, we see the evolution of their relationship, from the early days of passion and romance to the growing tension and resentment. Amy describes how their perfect life in New York crumbled after they moved to Nick's hometown in Missouri, following the loss of their jobs. Over time, Nick becomes distant, withdrawn, and even aggressive. Amy begins to fear for her safety, suspecting that Nick might be capable of violence. As the diary entries unfold, they reveal a deteriorating marriage filled with control, bitterness, and Amy's increasing isolation. The tone becomes more ominous, with Amy detailing her growing fears that Nick could hurt her. These revelations make Nick appear even more suspicious, painting him as an emotionally unstable husband who may have had a motive for making Amy disappear. The entries further manipulate both the detectives and the audience, making Amy's disappearance seem like the result of escalating domestic turmoil. As the investigation into Amy's disappearance deepens, a shocking revelation further tarnishes Nick's public image: he is having an affair. This information comes to light when Nick's secret relationship with Andy, one of his college students, is exposed. The affair had been going on for over a year, and despite the chaos surrounding Amy's disappearance, Nick had continued seeing Andy in secret. The young woman, unaware of the unfolding media frenzy, becomes an unexpected complication when she confronts Nick about their relationship. The affair paints Nick in an even more unfavorable light, especially in the eyes of the media and the public, who are already suspicious of him. His dishonesty, coupled with Amy's haunting diary entries, leads many to believe he had a motive to get rid of his wife. The exposure of his affair drives a deeper wedge between him and the public, making it even harder for him to prove his innocence. As the case spirals out of control, Nick is forced to confront the growing reality that he might never escape the shadow of guilt that looms over him. In a dramatic twist, the narrative shifts to Amy herself, revealing that she is alive and has meticulously staged her own disappearance. Through a voiceover and flashbacks, Amy explains her elaborate plan to frame Nick for her murder. Disillusioned by their failing marriage and furious over his affair, Amy crafted a flawless scheme, planting evidence and leaving a trail of clues that would lead to Nick's downfall. From fake diary entries detailing her fabricated fear of Nick to strategically spilling her own blood in the kitchen, every detail was carefully orchestrated. Amy's methodical planning demonstrates her intelligence and cunning, as she relishes in watching Nick suffer under the weight of suspicion. She also shows how she's hiding out in a remote motel, cutting her hair and changing her appearance to evade detection. The viewer now sees Amy in a new light, not as the helpless victim, but as a master manipulator who has turned Nick into the ultimate scapegoat. This revelation transforms the story, adding psychological complexity and setting up the battle between Nick and Amy that will drive the rest of the film. After Amy's plan is revealed, Nick begins to realize that he's been set up, and the situation is far worse than he initially thought. Desperate to prove his innocence, he enlists the help of high-profile lawyer Tanner Bolt, who specializes in defending high-profile clients in seemingly impossible cases. Tanner helps Nick prepare for the media storm and advises him on how to handle the mounting public and legal pressure. However, as the evidence continues to stack up against him, Nick grows increasingly paranoid and anxious. At the same time, Nick's twin sister Margot becomes his closest ally, fully convinced that Amy is framing him. Together, they begin piecing together the clues that Amy left behind, realizing how meticulously she's orchestrated everything. Nick goes on a public offensive, attempting to change the narrative by giving a heartfelt television interview, where he admits to his affair and mistakes, but denies any involvement in Amy's disappearance. Despite his efforts, Amy's plan is still airtight, and Nick faces an uphill battle to prove his innocence before he's completely destroyed. As Amy's plan to frame Nick unfolds perfectly, she continues hiding in a remote motel, assuming a new identity. However, her well-thought-out scheme hits an unexpected snag when she is robbed by two fellow motel guests, who take all of her money. With no resources and her situation becoming precarious, Amy is forced to come up with a new plan. In a moment of desperation, she contacts her wealthy ex-boyfriend, Daisy Collings, who had been obsessed with her since their breakup years ago. Daisy, still infatuated with Amy, eagerly agrees to help her, offering her refuge in his luxurious, secluded lake house. Though she is now safe and cared for, Amy realizes that Daisy's possessiveness is suffocating, and she feels trapped in a new way. Determined to regain control of her narrative and return to Nick on her own terms, Amy begins plotting her next move, manipulating Daisy into becoming an unwitting pawn in her grander scheme. Realizing that her time with Daisy is just another form of captivity, Amy decides to take drastic action to regain control of her life. She manipulates Daisy into thinking she is falling for him, using his affection to get closer. In a shocking and brutal scene, Amy seduces Daisy, then murders him during an intimate moment. She slashes his throat, making it look like she was escaping from a violent abduction. Covered in blood, Amy drives back home, claiming to have been kidnapped and assaulted by Daisy. She fabricates an elaborate story about how she was held against her will, further manipulating the media and law enforcement into believing she is the ultimate victim. Her return not only shocks the world but forces Nick into an even more difficult position, as he now has to pretend to believe her story to maintain his public image and avoid further suspicion. Amy's return is a media spectacle. Covered in blood and playing the part of the traumatized victim, she arrives at the hospital to a hero's welcome. She recounts her story to the authorities and the press, claiming that Daisy kidnapped her and held her captive. Her tale is carefully crafted, painting her as a brave survivor who managed to escape from an abusive captor. Everyone, including the media and the police, believes her version of events, despite the inconsistencies that Nick and Detective Boney notice. Nick, knowing the truth about Amy's manipulative scheme, is forced to play along to maintain his public image. Despite his anger and frustration, Nick realizes that he has no choice but to stay with Amy, as she controls the narrative and has convinced the world of her innocence. The tension between them is palpable as they return home, with Nick trapped in a marriage he knows is built on lies, but unable to escape without ruining his life. Amy's announcement that she is pregnant further solidifies Nick's entrapment, sealing their twisted relationship. In the chilling conclusion, Nick confronts Amy about everything she's done, from framing him for her murder to manipulating the media and killing Daisy. He threatens to leave her, knowing the truth about her lies and crimes. However, Amy remains unfazed, reminding him that their story is now public, and any attempt to leave her would make him look like the villain again. The final blow comes when Amy reveals that she is pregnant, having inseminated herself using Nick's sperm from a fertility clinic, ensuring that Nick will stay tied to her for life. Nick, realizing he is completely trapped, resigns himself to the situation. Despite his hatred for her, he understands that leaving Amy would not only ruin him publicly but also destroy any chance of having a relationship with his future child. In the final moments, Nick and Amy sit for an interview, where they present the perfect image of a loving couple to the world. Behind the smiles, Nick's inner torment is clear, but he knows he cannot escape Amy's manipulative grip. The film ends with a haunting sense of inevitability, as Nick is forced to continue the charade of their twisted marriage. Gone Girl is a masterclass in psychological suspense, where manipulation, deceit, and toxic relationships take center stage. Amy's meticulous plotting and Nick's entrapment make this film an unforgettable, twisted journey through marriage and media frenzy. It's a chilling reminder that nothing is as it seems, and even the most perfect relationships can hide the darkest secrets. If you enjoyed this recap, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more in-depth movie breakdowns and thrilling recaps. Stay tuned for more twists and turns in the world of cinema.